Well, another year has come and gone. This year undoubtedly had its ups and downs, but overall, I thought it was pretty alright. And throughout this year, I played a bunch of new games, 25 to be exact, and I thought that instead of singling out the 10 or 15 I enjoyed the most, it would be more fun to take them all and just rank them from least favorite to favorite. To help organizing all of them, I gave each game a ranking out of 10. So without further ado, let's get to ranking the games I played in 2021! Man, I wish I had more free time so I could have finished this at the start of January. Oh well, let's roll! Well, something had to take the bottom of this list, unfortunately. I was super looking forward to playing the Ninja Gaiden Grandmaster Collection when I learned it to come to Switch. However, the first game, it's rough. Like, really rough. That's not to downplay it completely, it has a lot of things going for it. The combat feels great, exploration in these levels is pretty enjoyable, all the weapons feel distinct, and while they're not all winners, I enjoyed most of them. The Lunar Staff and the Dual Katanas were my favorites though. Having said all that, the game definitely has shortcomings expected from a first game in a series. The difficulty is the first issue, not because it's hard, but why it's hard. The biggest problem is just how scarce health resources are, as you only have so much currency and you need to buy other things besides health potions. On top of that, the camera can be problematic and a lot of these enemies can just be obnoxious in their own ways. And that's before you get to the bosses, which range from above average to an absolute migraine. Don't misunderstand, this game is alright, but after playing through it once, I don't really feel compelled to do it again. This game gets a 6.8 out of 10. During 2021, I played quite a few retro games I missed out on previously. Say what you will about the Switch Online, but the fact you get a nice selection of retro titles for free with it is great. And it's because of that I finally got the chance to play Gunstar Heroes. Now I was familiar with this game for a long time, but never got the chance to play it until Genesis games hit the Switch. Now that I've played it though, I can definitely see where the hype came from. In essence, Gunstar Heroes is a light mix of Contra and Mega Man. You can choose the 4 initial stages in any order you want, then there's a set of final stages. The Contra aspect comes from the weapons you get to wield. There are 4 you get at the start with their own attributes, but the kicker is you can combine weapons for added effects. For example, the Force Gun gives you a rapid fire weapon, but when you combine it with fire, you get explosive rounds. Per Lightning with fire, and you get an immensely lethal short-range weapon. Or you can just go with the best option, per Lightning with Chaser. What is this thing you call aiming, and how does one do it? The weapons are absolutely the highlight here, but unfortunately, that sort of undermines the level design. Only one stage really stuck out as memorable to me because it had a fairly interesting gimmick. All the others kind of blend together for me, with nothing super notable outside of their boss fights. Granted, those boss fights are neat, but still. I definitely enjoyed my time with this game, and with how short it is, it's not hard to revisit from time to time. 7 out of 10. And going from one game about shooting to another, let's talk about Sora. You guys remember that game 100% Orange Juice? Yeah, most of those characters came from games like this. I tried this game back in 2018, and it just didn't click with me at the time. But then on a whim, I decided to give it a second chance, and I'm so glad I did. I won't mince words here. This game is absolutely brutal. Your dodging and shooting skills will be put to the test, but in turn, that makes this game thrilling. You have a few different choices for weapons for both your primary and secondary slots, as well as a third special slot. And then it's just a matter of shooting down every hostile entity the levels throw at you. Of course, you also have a dash maneuver to use. That dash lets you completely bypass energy-based attacks, but there's a trade-off. The more you use it, the more your heat gauge increases, and the more damage you'll take if you do get hit. And since this dash won't let you go through physical projectiles, you have to be really careful when using it. All this together makes for an incredibly fast-paced shooter, especially during those boss fights. Seriously, some of those had me supercharged with adrenaline. I won't say it's for everybody, but if you're up for a big challenge, I say go for it. Another 7 out of 10. If there's one thing indie developers love doing, it's making spiritual successors to games they clearly enjoyed. You got Freedom Planet emulating Sonic, Astro Striker Gunflow going for a Mega Man X-type game, and more recently, there's the Bloodstain games. The first of these, Curse of the Moon, was a very traditional Castlevania-inspired game, and it's fantastic. And that was just the appetizer, because 1 year later, we got Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. This was obviously going for a style like Symphony of the Night, the game that helped pioneer the Metroidvania genre. And Bloodstained does a pretty good job, for the most part. Let's start with the good stuff. The story was handled really well. It kept me engaged the whole way through, and that's in large part because the characters were so compelling. And the world design is another strong aspect. It definitely takes a lot of cues from Dracula's castle from Symphony of the Night, but adds a few of its own quirks, and it's overall really nicely laid out. Plus the combat just feels great. You have a ton of options when it comes to weapons, as well as a multitude of shards that drop from enemies to give you even more options. All this would have been phenomenal, but unfortunately, the game falters in quite a few areas. The first big issue for me is the game's pace. Miriam's default movement speed is slow, and you can't do much about it for a long while. On top of that, there are so many instances where you need to use specific shards in order to advance, which requires you to stop what you're doing, pause the game, swap out shards, get through the thing, and then swap back. Getting Link's Awakening vibes from this. Yes, you can set shortcuts for shards, but you have to update those every time you upgrade your gear, which does not solve the problem. And whoever decided the shard to explore underwater had to be a random drop should have been fired. That was so dumb! Finally, this game occasionally fails to give you direction. There were multiple times where I had to go around a bunch of areas to either find the area to use my new ability in, or find the boss fight to give me a new ability. This game was so close to being fantastic, but unfortunately all these negatives really added up and prevented it from being any better than just good. 7.2 out of 10. I've been on quite the roguelike kick as of late. Dead Cells, Encrypted, and Necrodancer were the spark, but last year I played a bunch more. So let's talk about Risk of Rain 2. This game came highly recommended to me by my pal Ren, and I can definitely see why. The premise is that you're exploring a planet that was giving off a bizarre signal, and go. Yeah, it's rather minimalist outside that intro, but I'm totally okay with that. As far as roguelikes go, this one is rather unique, as it's a 3D game with some elements seemingly taken from the MOBA genre of all things. Each of the survivors has their own weapons, passives, and attributes that you need to use in order to make it through, and they all feel truly different with their own strengths and weaknesses, which is pretty cool. My personal favorite though has to be the engineer. What do you do if bombs aren't enough to solve your problem? The answer? You use a gun. And if that don't work, you use more gun. Risk of Rain 2 also has an interesting take on difficulty, in that the longer your run goes on for, the harder things become. So you have to find a good amount of upgrades and find the teleporter as fast as you can. Not to mention, there's co-op in this game, so you can brave the planet with a buddy and help each other around. All of this is awesome, but there's a huge problem. The endgame is an absolute chore. To finish a run, you either need to survive this nightmare of a boss rush and then escape, or loop back to the beginning, which the game doesn't tell you how to do by the way, go through 3 areas at least, with high difficulty and double bosses, and obliterate yourself in this specific part. This game was obviously designed with co-op in mind, because alone it is a nightmare. I had to downgrade to easy mode to stand a chance. It's a shame. This game almost had it, but tripped up right at the finish line. I was expecting a bit more, so I'll give it a 7.3 out of 10. And now for the other retro games I played last year. I played the first Donkey Kong Country way back in the Wii era, and I had so much fun. However, I didn't play the sequels until just last year. I always intended to get DKC 2 and 3 on either my Wii U or 3DS, but always neglected doing so, and I don't know why. However, that's in the past because I've played through them now, and I really enjoyed them. Going through these varied areas with absolutely excellent level design was a total treat, especially when you find those exclusive bonus areas. DKC 2 definitely had the overall stronger lineup of levels, but there's something about 3 that makes me enjoy it just as much, if not more. Am I weird? Yeah, probably. You just noticed? These games are definitely really fun, however, they're not flawless. I did mention finding the bonus rooms can be fun, but there are just those select few that are either a pain to find or access. Plus, having to restart a level if you fail a bonus round makes me really thankful that retro services these days have a rewind feature. Those problems aside, I definitely had a great deal of fun. 7.3 out of 10. And speaking of DKC, we have another indie game acting as a spiritual successor here. Early in 2021, I heard from Black Mage Ben about this new indie game called Kaze and the Wild Mask, and it looked like a lot of fun. And on my birthday, I was graciously gifted the game on Steam, and I had a blast! As I mentioned, this game takes a lot of cues from Donkey Kong Country, specifically the second and third games. The protagonist Kaze plays like Dixie Kong, there are these special animal masks that sort of emulate the animal buddies seen in those games, and 2 bonus portals are on most levels. However, I feel that the bonus rooms are handled a lot better here for 2 big reasons. 1, they're never obtusely hidden, usually requiring a keen eye to spot them, and 2, if you fail, you can try again immediately with no nonsense. This made 100%ing Kaze a lot more fun than the DKC games, but unfortunately, this game is really short. It's a shame really. It feels like a theme park ride that's really fun but ends far too quickly. Nevertheless, I can definitely recommend this game wholeheartedly. Another 7.3 out of 10. I know I've said this before, but I just adore the Metroidvania genre, and this next game is one of the purest examples of one. Axial Verge. Now, a lot of indie games have tried emulating the style of more well-known games as I mentioned before, but Axial Verge is unique in that it's going for the style of Metroid. And I don't mean the series as a whole, no, I mean the first game on the NES. Granted, it includes stuff from modern games, so it's not overly arcade like Metroid 1 is, but still, it's an interesting direction to take. You explore this unknown planet with nothing but this multifaceted gun and a giant head guiding you. I'd say it makes sense in context, but I can't even say that with certainty because this story is just beyond complex. I would be here forever trying to explain it, but the Cliff Notes version is that the protagonist Trace was involved in an accident and wound up here. Trust me, the less you know, the better. Anywho, the gameplay definitely does take more from Metroid than other games in this genre. That gun of yours has a bunch of different firing modes, from a standard shot to a short-range spread shot, a lightning gun, and a bunch of other more unorthodox modes. All of them have their own uses, and as such, they're really fun to blast enemies with. On top of that, you get a drill, and later on get the ability to just, for lack of a better term, glitch past thin walls. All this sounds great, and it is, but there are a few snags in the works. For one, the lack of any sort of fast travel system makes backtracking a more noticeable issue here, and that's a bit annoying. But more importantly, similar to Bloodshed, there are absolutely times where you'll just be wandering aimlessly looking for where to go next. Though I feel here it wasn't as bad because old school Metroid was always like that. Nevertheless, this is definitely an interesting game, and while I don't think it's worth the full $20 price tag, it can definitely be worth it if it's on sale. 7.4 out of 10. Man, who knew the Persona characters could dance like this? I love myself a good rhythm game from time to time. They're just fun to chill to. And when my pal told me that I could get the Persona Endless Dancing bundle for a crazy good deal, I jumped on that the moment I could. In essence, these are Persona rhythm games, not much more to it than that. However, their gameplay style is fairly unique. You have to hit the corresponding buttons to the beat, sure, but the way he uses the top, bottom, and outer buttons is pretty cool, especially when you factor in the scratches that you hit with the right stick. And what would a rhythm game be without a solid music list? These three games not only have original songs from Persona 3, 4, and 5, but also a ton of absolutely stellar remixes. I adore this. They take these already catchy songs and turn them into absolute ear candy. What's more, in Persona 3 and 5, you can check out these little social conversations after meeting certain conditions to unlock costumes and ways to alter gameplay to make it easier or harder. I'd say my favorite of the three is definitely Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight. Call me biased, I don't care, I love this. Even still, all three games are just really fun. I can definitely recommend them if you love rhythm games. 7.5 out of 10. I adore the Ratchet & Clank series, but unfortunately I couldn't get a PS5 this year to experience Rift Apart. Maybe another day, but for now, I want to talk about Ratchet & Clank. The PS4 version. This game was a reboot of the series that took heavy cues from the movie that came out around the same time. It does follow quite a few story beats from the original game, but also adds its own spin on a few things, and to me, that's the perfect way to handle a reboot. And this transfers over to the gameplay as well. The first Ratchet game is totally fine, but compared to the later games in the series, it can feel a tad dated in a lot of places. The reboot kicks things up a notch in multiple ways. For one thing, weapons get upgraded versions just like all the other games past the first game, and that is always a great feeling. Plus, more importantly, you can actually take more than 4 hits before kicking the bucket. And on top of weapons gaining experience to become stronger baseline, you can upgrade them further with raritanium you find. You can do things like upgrade their damage even more, increase their effect radius, or various other weapon-specific perks. I gotta say, I love this system, as it really let me personalize weapons depending on my style, and I always appreciate that in a game. I won't go and say this is my favorite game in the series, but it was definitely a fun time, and that's all I can ask for in this series. 7.7 out of 10. There are a lot of indie games with a certain reputation about them. Undertale is widely revered because of its characters, Celeste is loved because it told a compelling story that hit close to home for a lot, and Dust is simply the best indie game, there's no two ways around that. However, an indie game I played last year had a special reputation. Ori and the Blind Forest is known for its beauty, and man, that's the best word to describe this game. Ori isn't too different from a standard Metroidvania. In fact, I'd say it's rather vanilla in many places. Standard exploration, an ability tree to upgrade certain attributes, a map system, we've all seen this before. However, it's not the core gameplay that makes Ori tick, it's the world and the story. It's a gripping tale all about restoring light to the land after it was cloaked in darkness, and you see the effects of that malice everywhere with all the characters you run into. If there was something I could easily compare it to, it's Hollow Knight. Ori and the Blind Forest heavily thrives on its story and atmosphere, and that made it stand out from the crowd. I definitely had my fun with this game, and while the gameplay is on the lower tier of the genre for me, I'll never forget the impact this playthrough had on me. 7.8 out of 10. It's always fun seeing what friends will randomly gift me on Steam for special occasions. On my birthday last year, one of my very good friends gifted me a game that I hadn't heard of up to that point, Moonlighter. Despite knowing absolutely nothing about the game itself, my friend spoke very highly of it, so naturally, I gave it a whirl, and I can definitely see why he enjoys it so much. Moonlighter has a really interesting premise. You know how in a lot of games you buy gear and materials from shopkeepers? Well, what if you were the shopkeeper instead? The whole premise is about exploring these dungeons in search of loot and selling said loot to the townsfolk to make money to upgrade your equipment and the town itself. Of course, selling stuff isn't as simple as putting a price tag on it. Let's take out our notebooks and start to learn about business and pricing. Oh, calm down, it's actually really simple. There's absolutely trial and error involved. You have to make sure the price is low enough to get people to want to buy it, but high enough that you make a decent profit off of it. For how out there this idea is, it's actually really fun to experiment with, and it's even more fun to get right. Of course, selling stuff is the easy part. Finding all this stuff is where the real challenge lies. The dungeons are structured not unlike the first Legend of Zelda actually, with square rooms all connected to one another and several mid-bosses guarding the exit for each floor leading to a big boss at the end. Throughout these dungeons, you'll find materials from enemies you kill as well as chests you find, but there's a catch. If you die, you lose everything. That's why it's important to know when to bail. You're definitely not going to get through a dungeon on your first go, unless you're absolutely crazy, in which case, I implore you to try. So it's best to tackle it gradually and constantly upgrade your gear. It helps that each of the weapons has their own strengths and weaknesses, and you can carry 2 at a time, so there's definitely something for every playstyle. If you're in the mood for a different kind of roguelike, this is definitely not one to pass up on. 7.9 out of 10. So I mentioned how Ninja Gaiden Sigma was rough, but that definitely didn't discourage Team Ninja, because they gave us 2 new games afterwards. And I don't know what kind of ninja magic they were using, but Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2 and Ninja Gaiden 3 Versus Edge were massive improvements. Sigma 2 largely follows the same beats as the first game, but everything was tweaked for the better. For one, save points now fully heal you, so you're no longer scrounging for every bit of recovery from potions, so you're free to upgrade your weapons more. And speaking of said weapons, upgrading them now does more than simply up their damage, it also unlocks new combos for them. And this was the game to introduce the Falcon's Talons and the Eclipse Scythe. These are easily my favorite weapons, as I can either enact the deadliest performance of Wolverine on ice, or deliver an edgy killing spree that will make Reaper look over in envy. And finally, the difficulty was absolutely perfect. Never overly difficult, but not easy either. So how does Razor's Edge compare? Well, it definitely made some changes that are both good and bad. On one hand, I absolutely adore how upgrades were handled here. Instead of gathering essence to spend at the shop, you instead earn karma points from combat and exploration that you can spend on weapons, ninpo, and upgrades at any time. It's not only super convenient, but also really incentivizes getting good at combo change, as you're rewarded more for it. Speaking of the combat, it feels a bit more fluid than in the first 2 games, especially when you get the opportunity to go on a bloody rampage. On the other hand, there are snags. For one, there are definitely an unhealthy amount of battles that have enemies just lob explosives in the background, and they typically go down in just 1 hit. So they're not only a nuisance, but they're also pointless. Also, a lot of bosses have a severe case of spamitis, and that can get flat out infuriating. Razor's Edge is still fantastic, but I like Sigma 2 a bit more because it's more consistent. Still, both games get an easy 8 out of 10. It feels good to finally have a game like this. When it comes to multiplayer fun with friends, the Mario Party series is one I often turn to. Just getting together with some pals for some laughs and rage just doesn't get old. And just last year, we got a celebration of all of that with a return to form in Mario Party Superstars. This is really what Mario Party the Top 100 should have been, because it aces just about everything beautifully. 5 classic boards are here to enjoy, 100 minigames to play, an online mode that works supremely well, it's kinda scary actually, and it's just so much fun! I've been playing this game to death with my friends ever since I got it on launch day. We love just jumping into these boards and playing together without a care in the world, doing our best to grab stars, squashing the competition in the minigames, using items to our advantage, or just risking it all on chance time. It can sometimes be nothing, or an absolute game changer, who knows? I really hope Nintendo adds to this with more boards in the future, because as it stands, this is easily one of the best multiplayer games you can own on Switch. 8 out of 10. It's still crazy that this is a thing. In case you were dormant the last 5 years or so, Crash Bandicoot didn't have it so hot for a while. After his initial trilogy, he had decent presence before falling into a deep hibernation, before a jolt to the defibrillator with some stellar remakes, and then finally a brand new original game. Crash 4, it's about time. That subtitle couldn't be any more apt because this game felt like a long time coming. Crash 4 takes what worked in the original trilogy and just dials it up way past 11. The level design is absolutely superb across the board. The core designs are all sublime. Adding to this are the new dimension masks that give Crash and Coco new abilities. Nani Loli can phase materials in and out, Akano lets them go full on Tasmanian Devil and just shred absolutely everything in sight and glide in the air, Kupano can slow time, that makes for some really creative parts in the game, and Ika Ika makes you question which way up is. But how these are incorporated into the levels, they feel so natural, and that's amazing! And Crash and Coco aren't even the only characters you get to play as. Tawna returned after so long, and this time, she has a grappling hook. The ever-lovable Dingo Dial brings his vacuum gun to the party, and even Cortex is playable, and that is so neat! Plus, I just love all the costumes you can unlock, it adds so much charm. So why didn't this game make it any higher? It's because trying to complete it is an absolute chore. Every level gives you 3 gems for collecting Wumpa Fruit, and there's also a hidden gem in every level, and a gem for dying less than 3 times. But the big problem here is the crate gems, because Crash 4 has so many levels that just hide crates in just incredibly obtuse locations, making it guaranteed you'll miss at least one your first time through. And then there are the inverted levels with their own set of gems, the boss fights you effectively have to do twice, there are the time releases you'd expect, flashback tapes that require getting them in levels without dying, then doing these crazy puzzle levels, and insanely perfect relics because the devs just couldn't say when! I'm usually a completionist with games like this, but I had to draw a line here, and that was a huge blow. Still a fantastic game though, and the future looks bright for Crash. 8.1 out of 10. I don't need to say this, but you all know I adore the Pokemon series so much, so naturally I was excited for the remakes of Diamond and Pearl. Pokemon Diamond always held a very special place in my heart because it was the first video game I was hyped for before release. So the idea of playing it with more modern conventions, as well as, you know, a speed faster than molasses, was pretty exciting. And at the end of the day, the game's pretty good. Realistically, there isn't a ton I could say here because Pokemon Brilliant Diamond is a pretty spot-on recreation of Diamond. However, there are a few new twists. For one thing, HMs are now handled with the Poketch, so you no longer need to dedicate party slots to break rocks or cut small trees. Plus, the underground was completely overhauled into the Grand Underground. You still have the ability to dig for treasure, but there's also Pokemon hideaways where you can catch new and previously rare Pokemon, and that's fantastic! Finally, there's Renmest Park, where you can battle and catch legendaries, and there are quite a few to catch. This is definitely a great time. Internet haters be darned. 8.2 out of 10. You guys remember Super Mario 3D World, right? Really fun 3D Mario game that came out on the Wii U? Oh wait, it was on the Wii U, so not too many people played it. But that's okay, because Nintendo's been giving a ton of Wii U games a second life on the Switch, and 3D World was amongst them. But they didn't just port 3D World and call it a day. They changed quite a bit. Characters run faster, the UI's a bit cleaner, there's a completely new side campaign, Captain Toad stages are multiplayer. Hang on a second. Captain Toad is multiplayer now? Wow, that's awesome! Oh, and there's also Bowser's Fury. That's kinda neat, I guess. Gotcha! This is easily the best new thing that was added. 3D World is definitely a fantastic game, but for a 3D Mario game, it doesn't do much with exploration. Bowser's Fury, meanwhile, is just that. This game takes the formulas of 64 and Odyssey and puts them together for one incredible adventure. The premise is pretty simple. Bowser is absolutely pissed off, and Bowser Jr. needs your help to stop him. That's pretty much it, and that's all you need. Exploring this new world of Lake Lapcat is such a thrill, mostly because everything is cat-themed. I'm a cat person, and I'm easy to please, what can I say? Each of these islands has 5 cat shines that you get for completing objectives, and they're all quick, snappy, and incredibly fun. However, be careful, because if you dilly-dally for too long... Oh, hi, Bowser! Run away! Yeah, Fury Bowser drops down every so often just to cause mayhem, but fortunately, you can fight back by having Mario go Kaiju Super Saiyan Cat Mario! I can't believe that's a sentence. All this together makes for easily one of the most enjoyable Mario games. It can definitely be a bit annoying to fully complete, but playing normally is an absolute blast. 8.6 out of 10. So I mentioned that Ori and the Blind Forest is a great game, but what can you do when you have a great game? How about giving it a sequel that makes it go from great to phenomenal? And that's precisely what happened with Ori and the Will-O-the-Wisps. While Blind Forest focused primarily on story and atmosphere, Will-O-the-Wisps instead focused on exploration and combat, the traits I value more in this genre. You not only have a new blade weapon, but you can also learn all kinds of new techniques and attain shards to give you even more capabilities. You have so many options and leeway with how you want to play this game, and it's absolutely stunning! And when you add in the new traversal abilities you get, and this fantastic new world layout to use them in, it's just, this game wins! It just wins! Blind Forest is good, but Will-O-Wisp goes way beyond good to just be easily my new third favorite Metroidvania after Guacamelee 2 and of course Dust. Definitely a must-have for any fan of this genre, an easy 9 out of 10. One thing I love about the roguelike genre is how each game has something that lets it stand out on its own. Necrodancer has rhythm game mechanics, Risk of Rain 2 is 3D, and One Step from Eden speaks to me on a personal level. This game plays like Mega Man Battle Network, and that's both super neat and super unique, so...
Hey yo, did somebody say One Step from Eden? I love that game!
Oh, Safer! Wanna join me in fanboying? You were the guy that convinced me to try this game out.
No, I don't want to fanboy about one of my favorite games. Of course I do!
Then let's do this! One Step from Eden is hands down one of the best indie games I've ever played.
I wouldn't even stop there, man. This is one of the best games I've ever played, and one that wastes no time upon starting it up. You hop in, get taught the basics, then are thrusted into a hectic and exciting gameplay loop.
Like I mentioned, the battle system takes heavy inspiration from the Mega Man Battle Network series.
Let's go!
Yeah, anyways, you got grid-based movement and attacks that vary in terms of their range and what they can do. Some examples include Step Slash, creating fire, or my personal favorite, Poison. I never pass up Acid Rain.
The variety is absolutely insane. I love just getting whatever looks cool in my runs. But the game also allows you to pre-plan if you know what you're doing and set up your character just right with the great options at your disposal. It puts a great emphasis on player skill alongside the typical roguelike randomness.
And speaking of those characters, they all have their own traits to help them stand out. My personal favorite is Reva. I just got a thing for shield maidens.
And my favorite was Celesty, particularly her invade build. I think she's pretty cool in general, but sometimes I just feel like jumping right into it if you catch my drift.
Each character is definitely fun in their own way, and when you get just the right combination of artifacts and spells that let you make mincemeat of absolutely everything, it is some of the most fun I have ever had with this genre.
But despite this, the game never lets up on the challenge department with its dynamic and relentless difficulty. Enemies are aggressive and strong, but all have great tells and force you to get good at the game without limiting you too frequently. This is the brilliance of One Step from Eden and why I love it so much.
And on top of that, there's even multiple ways you can go about a run. You can choose to spare everyone for a happy ending, not kill everyone for a neutral ending, or just go on a homicidal rampage. And one last thing, this game has the usual roguelike trope of don't mess with the shopkeep. She's absolutely relentless if you piss her off. But if you can win, oh man, she is so much fun to play as. She's absolutely busted, but hey, you earned that right to play God.
Meaning that on top of your typical roguelike replayability, the game gives you so many reasons to come back with the list never seeming to end. I've done all of the game's achievements and I still can't get enough. And how about that soundtrack? Seriously, the music in this game is just so...
Okay, how about we wrap this up before we're here for the next half hour at least?
Half an hour? I could go on for way longer. We haven't even brought up the sprite work and general visual prowess this game...
Zephyr!
Okay, but can I at least talk about the great bosses? Especially those final ones that just...
Okay, we're done. But here's the craziest thing. This isn't even my favorite roguelike I played in 2021.
What did you say?
Next segment, One Step from Eden gets a 9.1 out of 10. I am putting a fan-made Pokemon game over an official one. I could see the reactions being one of two things. Either mocking comments that fans can make a better game, or claims that I am cheating for including a fan game. Meh, I can live with that.
Arrow, I seriously think we need to discuss you not having One Step from Eden as your favorite roguelike.
Sure, just let me open the trap door. Anyways, Pokemon fan games are quite interesting to look at, as they all try something new to help them stick out from the official games. You've Insurgents with its gritty story and Delta Pokemon, a game like Ultra Red is just straight up Fire Red, but every Pokemon was redesigned in every aspect, and that made the experience fresh. But rarely do they go that extra mile. Pokemon Clover, meanwhile, goes that extra mile, then goes about 10 more. Most Pokemon fan games use pre-established Pokemon, but these devs looked at that approach and scoffed. They made over 300 completely original Pokemon, and despite this being a ROM hack and not a pure fan game, they somehow managed to give each of them not just unique sprites, types, moves, and abilities, but even unique cries. I didn't even think that was possible for a ROM hack. And on top of that, they even added later gen mechanics like terrains and gave new and later moves their own unique animations, which is just wild. Ace Pokemon designs can range from fairly simple, to genuinely creative, to just plain bizarre. Yeah, this kind of game is not one to take seriously. Knowing it was made by mods on 4chan should suggest that. As for the gameplay though, it's apparent that devs are quite skilled at Pokemon. The AI is a lot more advanced than the usual games, and gym leaders usually have counters to their counters. If you show this game to the average person who claims Pokemon is too easy, they'd either have a field day with this, or break things in frustration. That said, this difficulty is actually really fair for the most part. If a battle is too tough, there's usually something you can change to approach it, either a different hold item on a Pokemon, a party member you can switch out, or simply changing a move. I'll freely admit, this is not a game for everyone. You need to have an extensive knowledge of this series and be willing to put up with the 4chan-lated absurdity. But if you can handle it, this is easily one of the best Pokemon games you can play. 9.2 out of 10. Being a Metroid fan isn't easy. We always get these fantastic games, but then afterwards, it's often followed by very long hiatuses where the future is uncertain. But when those breaks end, it's back to that high standard of quality. And that perfectly sums up Metroid Dread. This was a sequel to Metroid Fusion that was 19 years in the making. Naturally, after all that time, expectations were quite lofty, but man, this game aced that and then some. At its core, Metroid Dread is a pretty typical 2D Metroid game, but adds quite a few little things. For one, Samus now has a nifty slide maneuver to get through tight spaces or to dodge attacks. It does mean you're without the Morph Ball for a while, however, which is definitely bizarre. Dread also inherits the free aiming feature from Samus Returns, and it feels just as great here. Really, Samus is just incredibly fun to control, whether it's running, shooting, wall jumping, etc. Of course, there's more to this game than just that. Samus was sent to figure out what happens to the Emmy drones on this planet, and you do find them, but they want to kill you. Going through these Emmy segments is beyond tense because there's this malicious being that is hunting you down and ready to kill you. Now you can get away if you're really quick on the draw. Actually pulling it off though? A lot easier said than done. So your best option is to just avoid it, usually using the Phantom Cloak in a corner. Please go away, please go away, please go away! And tying everything together is the exploration of the planet as a whole. Similar to Fusion, your AI companion Adam will give you advice on where to go next, but this game isn't quite as linear. There's still plenty of exploration to be had, especially when going back through areas with new abilities. This game blew me away in so many aspects. The control, the planet, the tension, the bosses, the story that I won't spoil. It's just phenomenal. I think this might be my new favorite game in the series, and I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10. Oh man, I have been waiting for a long time to gush about this game. The final roguelike I played in 2021, and all I can say is this: Hades is one hell of a good time. This was one of the first games I played during the new year, and all throughout 2021, I kept going back to it over and over again. The premise is that you're Zagreus, the son of Hades, god of the underworld, and you're trying to make your way out. Except Hades really wants you to stay and make sure you do so by any means necessary. However, Zagreus is more than up to that task. With 6 different weapons to choose from and aspects to change how they play, passive buffs from his Darkness Spear, and the help of the Olympian gods on his side, he is more than capable of absolutely destroying anything that stands in his way. Those 6 weapons all play very differently from one another and are all fun in their own way. My favorite though is the shield. You know what they say, a strong defense is a good offense. And when you add in the Olympian boons that can grant extra effects to your weapons, special passives, or even new attacks, runs of this game become fast-paced and just an absolute blast. And the best part, dying isn't even a big deal, it's all part of the experience. With how you can passively buff up Zack with his mirror, it's all about finding the right setup that works for you. And then things went from fantastic to amazing with all the special conditions you can enforce to make things more interesting. And one last crucial thing, yes, you can pet the doggo. Cerberus is a good boy. For almost the entire year, this was at the top for me, and I fully expected it to stay that way. However, a game I played late in 2021 managed to overtake it. That still won't stop me from giving this game my highest recommendation, 9.7 out of 10. You know, we've actually been here before. I've explained my utter elation for this game previously, so how can it be in this video too? Simple, because this game I hold so dear was made even better. I'm of course talking about Persona 5 Royal. As you all probably know, I have Persona 5 as one of my favorite games of all time. Heck, I went to all the trouble of let's playing that game, it should be pretty apparent. But as is Atlas tradition, an expanded version came out 3 years later. But what did it add that made it take my top spot? Was it some tweaked dungeon designs to make them feel fresh? How about some new areas of Shibuya to explore? Maybe some tweaks to an already great battle system to make it even better? Actually, it was just the addition of the darts minigame. That is exactly what Persona 5 was lacking. Jokes aside, everything they added really worked to this game's advantage. Persona trades really add a new dimension to battles, and to balance this out, bosses were made much harder, and I love that. And they even made some nice little quality of life improvements, like being able to do things in the Blanc after going into the metaverse. It wasn't needed, but it was nice. And there's even more, but I don't want to spoil anything. If you love RPGs like I do, then this is absolutely not a game to pass up. Persona 5 Royal took was already my second favorite game of all time and made it my #1 favorite. So it should come as no surprise that I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. I'm Arrow Dragon, and here's to more gaming goodness in 2022. Well, that wraps up my first major video of 2022. What did you guys think of this different structure? And let me know if you'd like me to do more ranking videos in addition to my usual countdowns. And with this finally done, I can finally get cracking on a new Let's Play, so be on the lookout for that soon. Well, until next time, this is Arrow Dragon, signing off.